Ready for a deep dive?
Always.
Okay, good. Because today we are tackling the Bhagavad-gītā.
Oh, nice. Which chapter are we looking at?
We're going to be in chapter 12
Okay.
and really trying to dig into the different paths to spiritual realization.
And this is one of the things that I love about the Gita.
Yeah.
Is that it really does lay out,
It's very like choose your own adventure almost.
It is a spiritual choose your own adventure. And I think this chapter in particular really gets at this question that I think a lot of spiritual seekers have, which is like, is there one right path?
Right.
Is there, one way to connect with the divine? Or are there multiple trails to the same summit?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like that's something that I think people wrestle with a lot, especially if they're new to a spiritual path or if they're exploring different traditions. So this chapter, I mean, you said it kind of dives right into that, right?
It does. It jumps right into this conversation,
Yeah.
right, between Arjuna, who's our main character, and his divine guide, Krishna.
Right.
And Arjuna basically just comes right out and asks him.
He's like cut to the chase.
Yeah. He's like, which one is it?
Yeah.
Which path is superior?
Okay.
Dedicating yourself fully to a personal God like you, Krishna,
Okay.
or immersing oneself in this impersonal, unmanifested Brahman.
So basically saying, do I focus on a personal relationship or do I aim for more of this abstract understanding?
Exactly. You
Okay.
got it. And you know what's really
Yeah.
interesting is that Krishna's response is kind of surprising to some.
Okay.
He very confidently states that those who dedicate themselves to his personal form, who worship with this unshakable faith, they're the ones considered the most spiritually evolved.
So he's kind of like direct line to me, that's the fast track.
You could say that.
Okay.
He emphasizes how deep and unwavering this devotion is,
Okay.
comparing it to being in a perpetual state of samadhi.
Wow.
So think like, that feeling of being on a meditation retreat.
Right.
But it's not a retreat. This is your constant state of being.
That's what I call inner peace.
Right.
Sign me up.
So that's the level of connection we're talking about.
Okay. Got it. Now, this is where I feel like we're really getting into this idea of bhakti-yoga, right? This path of devotion, which is a cornerstone of the Bhagavad-gītā.
Okay.
But before we go too far down that path, it's also important to remember that the text doesn't completely dismiss those seekers who are drawn to this path of realizing the impersonal,
Okay.
the unmanifested. So it acknowledges that journey
Right.
and even talks about the qualities that are needed to walk that path successfully.
So for someone who's drawn to that idea of understanding the unmanifested Brahman, what does their journey look like according to this chapter?
So picture this. Intense self-control,
Okay.
selfless service to all beings,
Okay.
and deep contemplation of these abstract concepts. So it's a very rigorous path of self-discipline and
Well-
like profound intellectual exploration.
That sounds like navigating a maze in the dark, maybe.
A little bit, right?
Yeah. It doesn't sound easy. And I think that's what's really cool is that the Gita is very self-aware
Okay.
about the potential pitfalls of this path.
Okay.
So it validates it, but it doesn't sugarcoat it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially because, we're talking about, the text even uses the term embodied, right?
Sure.
To talk about people who experience the world through their physical senses.
Exactly.
And so it makes sense that it would be difficult for someone who's so connected to the physical world to then grasp this idea of the unmanifested.
It's like trying to grab onto smoke. You think you have it, but it's always slipping through your finger.
So what are some of the challenges that it specifically mentions?
So it warns about getting lost in this maze of intellectual pursuits without ever reaching that ultimate goal of spiritual liberation.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. So it's almost like you can get caught up in the intellectual side of things and never really actually apply it to your life. Right.
It's like reading about all these exotic destinations, but never actually going on the trip.
Yeah.
Like you become an expert in travel trivia,
Right.
but you never actually allow yourself to have that experience.
That's such a good analogy.
And that's where I think the text gets really interesting because it kind of contrasts these challenges
Okay.
with this idea of swift liberation through bhakti,
Okay.
through complete devotion to Krishna.
Okay.
And it's like, Krishna's acknowledging, like, I get it. Trying to wrap your head around this
Yeah.
impersonal aspect can be really tough. But if you just, direct all of your love and devotion towards me, I'll take care of the rest.
So it's almost like he's offering, I don't want to say a shortcut, but
No, I mean,
a way to kind of
yeah.
cut through the noise
Yeah.
and find
yeah.
a more direct route.
I think that's a good way to put it. And the text uses this really powerful image of a parent scooping up their child from danger.
Oh, wow.
It's like this immediate safety and guidance
Right.
that's offered to those who choose this path of devotion.
So it's really bringing in that personal aspect of bhakti.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not about this like complex concept. It's about fostering this relationship.
Yeah, this connection.
Yeah, a genuine connection with the divine.
Okay. So it's not about getting lost in the intellectual labyrinth, but it's about like cultivating this bond, this connection.
Exactly. And, like any relationship, it takes effort. Right. It's a conscious choice to nurture that bond. And that's why the text goes on to actually give like some practical steps for how to cultivate that devotion.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So how do you actually like put this into practice in daily life?
So it encourages like fixing your mind and your intellect on Krishna
Okay.
and weaving these devotional practices into your daily life.
Right.
So it's not just like, oh, I meditate for an hour
Yeah.
and then the rest of the day,
Right.
I just, do whatever.
It's about finding those touch points throughout the day.
Exactly. And some of the specific things it mentions are chanting.
Okay.
So chanting Krishna's name, offering food to Krishna as a symbol of love and surrender,
Okay.
and immersing yourself in the sacred text.
Okay. So really like making the divine a part of your experience.
Yeah, it's about that integration,
Right. Yeah.
not about separating it. And what I think is really interesting is even though like bhakti-yoga is clearly like the Bhagavad-gītā is like, this is it, this is the path.
Yeah.
It also recognizes that
Right.
diving headfirst into the depths of devotion
Yeah.
is not for everybody.
Right. Not right away.
At least not right away.
It's like, hey, if you're not ready for the deep end of the pool, it's okay. You can wade in. We've got floaties.
I like that. Yeah, it's like spiritual growth is a process.
It is.
And so for those who need a gentler approach,
Yeah.
it suggests cultivating knowledge.
Okay.
So developing a deeper understanding of reality,
Okay.
of our place in it.
So it's not an either or. You can kind of blend these things.
Right.
Okay. What else does it say about some of those other approaches?
It emphasizes the practice of meditation
Okay.
as a way to kind of quiet the mind
Right.
and connect with that inner self.
It's like turning down the volume on the chatter so you can actually...
Yes, tune in. So you can actually tune in to that subtle frequency.
Right.
It also talks about renouncing the fruits of one's actions.
Okay. Now, when people hear that,
I know.
they might think, oh, so I have to quit my job. I have to give away all my possessions.
Exactly.
So what does that actually mean?
It's not about abandoning all action. It's about detaching from the outcome.
Okay. So can you give an example?
Yeah. So imagine like you're working on this project at work and you're
Okay.
putting your heart and soul into it.
Okay.
But instead of being fixated on like, am I going to get the praise? Am I going to get the promotion? It's like finding that fulfillment in the act of creation itself.
So being present in it
Yes.
and not being so worried about the reward at the end.
Exactly. It's recognizing that true satisfaction comes from the act of service,
Okay.
not from some sort of external validation.
Right. Or material gain.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that, that idea of letting go of the oars and letting the river guide you instead of constantly battling against it.
Exactly. Flowing with life.
Yeah. So we've got all these different approaches, but even though the Bhagavad-gītā seems to have a clear favorite in bhakti yoga, is there like a common thread?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any universal qualities or virtues that it encourages no matter which path you're on?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, the text outlines several qualities that are essential for spiritual growth, regardless of your chosen path. And it does this really beautifully by describing a true devotee,
Okay.
someone who embodies the essence of bhakti.
So what are some of the defining characteristics? If you had to paint a picture of a true devotee, what would that look like?
Well, one of the first things it mentions is this freedom from envy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So a true devotee can actually find joy in celebrating other people's successes.
No, that's a tough one, especially like in today's world.
Oh, no, right.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with like images of what we lack, and
It's so easy to fall into that comparison trap.
it is. It is.
But the text suggests that, this freedom from envy, it comes from connecting with a sense of abundance.
Okay.
It's like understanding that there's enough for everyone.
So shifting from that scarcity mindset to one of abundance.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it also emphasizes humility. So letting go of the ego, attachment to material possessions.
So it's almost like decluttering not just our homes, but our minds as well.
Yeah, like releasing that grip on needing things to have a
man.
certain amount of whatever.
Okay.
It also talks about the importance of equanimity.
Okay.
So like staying really grounded and balanced no matter what life throws your way.
So not getting too high on the highs or too low on the lows.
Exactly. You're finding that inner stillness so that even when those storms of life come, you can weather them with a sense of, like, grace and resilience.
That seems like a superpower. So how do you actually cultivate that?
Well, the Gita suggests finding contentment in all circumstances. So it's like finding that joy in those simple things
Yeah.
instead of constantly chasing after those fleeting pleasures.
It's about appreciating what we have.
Exactly. And it also emphasizes self-control,
Okay.
especially over the senses. Now, this isn't about suppressing our desires,
Right.
but it's about, like, skillfully channeling them
Right.
in healthy, constructive ways.
So not denying our human experience, but more like mastering those impulses so we can live a more like fulfilling life.
Exactly. Aligning your actions with your values.
Okay.
Making conscious choices. And then finally, it talks about this unwavering focus on the divine.
Right, which kind of goes back to that idea of bhakti.
Right, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like that becomes the ground
Okay.
from which all these other qualities can kind of blossom.
Right, so it's like that single-pointed concentration. It helps all these other things kind of fall into place.
Exactly. And here's what I think is so beautiful.
Mm.
The text emphasizes that anyone,
Yeah.
regardless of, like, their past or their perceived shortcomings,
Yeah.
they can reach this highest spiritual state. It's really a message of hope.
I love that. It's a reminder that this path is open to everyone.
It is. And, as we've been talking about all this, I've been thinking about how relevant this is, in our modern world,
Oh my gosh.
where there's so much distraction, so much external pressure.
It's so easy to feel like overwhelmed,
No.
disconnected.
And, like, we have spiritual ADD.
Yes, 100%.
And so I think that's where this beauty and this simplicity of bhakti,
Yeah.
of devotion, can be really powerful because it gives us this path.
It's like an anchor.
Exactly.
like-
in the chaos.
It's like this ancient wisdom
Yeah.
that still feels so relevant.
It does. Well, as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here into chapter 12, is there one final, like, thought-provoking nugget that you can leave our listeners with?
Yeah. As we were exploring these different paths,
Yeah.
one thing that really struck me was that the text acknowledges how challenging it is
Right.
to focus on the impersonal.
Yeah.
Especially, for us, like we're embodied.
You like our creature comforts. It's true.
Exactly. And so, it kind of begs the question, if this ancient text is
Right.
recognizing that,
Yeah.
how much more relevant is that today?
Right. With all the distractions.
When our attention spans are like,
Shrinking by the minute. Exactly. So the question I want to leave you with is, could this path of bhakti, with its focus on personal connection, on these tangible practices, could that be the antidote?
ooh, that's a good one.
Could that be the thing that helps us reconnect and find that sense of belonging? It's something to think about.
It is. Well, on that note, we'll leave you to your reflections, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.